Former President Jimmy Carter is being remembered this morning in Atlanta, Georgia. We have a live look for you at the Carter Center, where the 39th president is lying in repose at this hour. Mourners are lining up to honor him until tomorrow, when his casket will then be flown to Washington, D.C. Jay Gray sets the scene for us from Atlanta.
Well, despite rain that's been hard at times and colder weather here, crowds continue to gather at Jimmy Carter's Presidential Library in Atlanta to pay their respects to the 39th president. Former President Carter really set the benchmark for service by a president after leaving the White House, and few in or outside the political arena really have come anywhere close to his reach or matching his impact as a global humanitarian, helping the disabled and the needy across the United States and around the world, fighting disease and fighting for democracy and fair elections. President Carter spent most of his life, 80 of his 100 years, in rural Georgia. He lived in the same house that he built with his wife Rosalind in 1962, only leaving there twice, once to spend 4 years in the governor's mansion here in Atlanta, and then 4 years in the White House as well. He was someone who was very active in his faith, someone who spent a lot of time in his community, and he's being remembered for that by so many who say he was really what was best about their state, about our country.
President Carter represented a lot of people, and we were very proud of him. We respected him.
A respect that will follow the former president to Washington. His body will travel to the nation's capital tomorrow. He will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda ahead of his funeral set for Thursday morning at the National Cathedral. That's the latest from here in Atlanta. I'm Jay Gray, NBC News.
And officials of the Carter Center say more than 10,000 people paid their respects to the late president in the first 24 hours that his body has been lying in repose. I think he's widely viewed as one of the best post-presidents in history, just for all of the humanitarian work that he's done.
And no president has had a life like his. I mean, you could slice it any different way politically, but he has had a remarkable life. And
100
we're going to be
years.
Following those remembrances, of course, throughout the week.
Absolutely.
Well, today our nation prepares for its final farewell to former President Jimmy Carter. He died December 29th at 100 years old.
NBC5's Sandra Torres joins us now in studio with more on the services that are planned for today and what we should know about this National Day of Mourning, Sandra.
Yeah, we've been reporting that President Biden declared a National Day of Mourning. There's a big significance to that in order to honor the life and legacy of former President Jimmy Carter. And the tradition signifies a one-day government shutdown. And here's what you should know about what is impacted by this observance. U.S. Postal Service offices, they're closed for the day. So are all U.S. courts, including the Supreme Court, and U.S. stock markets. They're also closed, all in honor of former President Jimmy Carter.
Decency, I think that's the adjective everybody uses for him. Respect, selfless, willing to do what was right, even if it wasn't popular.
And thousands of mourners, like that woman, have stopped by the Capitol to pay their respects, some waiting in line for hours in frigid temperatures. The 39th president has been lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda since Tuesday afternoon. He's the 13th president to do so. And today, the funeral service will take place at the National Cathedral. President Biden will deliver a eulogy for his late friend. And then after that, Special Air Mission 39 will take the 39th president home to Georgia for a private service at the church where he taught Sunday school for decades. And then he'll be buried next to his beloved wife, Rosalind. Now, Jimmy Carter's vice president and dear friend, Walter Mondale, also wrote a eulogy for the late president. Mondale died in 2021. So today his son, Ted, will read his father's tribute at the national funeral service. Back to you, Michelle.
Sandra, thank you very much.
Now, one man who had a central part in planning today's state funeral is from the Chicago suburbs.
Political reporter Marian Ahern is here to introduce us to him. Who is this gentleman?
Yes, Rick Jaskulka. You might not know him. I've known him for many years. He first joined former President Jimmy Carter's campaign in 1975. His friendship for more than 50 years, and today we want to give you a look behind the scenes. As the 39th president of the United States is laid to rest, a close friend reflects on the time he spent with Jimmy Carter traveling the globe together.
There was a point at which Jimmy Carter became much more than a president or a former president. He became family.
Rick Jaskocka was the advance lead for Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, meaning he handled scheduling and logistical challenges. He owns a PR firm in Chicago, but his family in D.C. now, having helped plan the state funeral.
Our mission is to support the Carter family.
Something Jaskocka's been doing for 5 decades. This was the summer of 1988 when the Democratic National Convention was in Atlanta. And here they are in Ethiopia on a Carter Center mission. When I was a reporter in Atlanta in 1987, Jaskocka arranged this interview with former President Carter and his wife Rosalind.
The number one thing to know about them is how committed both Jimmy and Rosalind Carter were to improving the well-being of people who didn't have all the advantages in life around the world.
Carter, known for being punctual and tough as nails. That includes 1986, when the Carters came to Chicago to build houses for Habitat for Humanity.
They were out at the work site from crack of dawn till dusk every day.
President Carter lived to be 100 years old, making him the oldest of all U.S. presidents. Jaskocka says Rosalind's death in 2023 took a real toll on him.
They were partners in everything. They really, truly were life partners. And so I think, that just, once she was gone, I think it just became very tough.
So what should other people take away from Jimmy Carter's life? Rick Jaskocka says, check out the Carter Center's work, because that work will continue.
It must have been great to have interviewed him, and he's quite a legacy, particularly in Georgia, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was a reporter in Atlanta many years ago. It was a very special moment.
All right. Thanks so much, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne.
The tradition for honoring the life and legacy of a president was altered right here in Chicago in the 1800s, believe it or not, during President Abraham Lincoln's funeral.
It is an interesting bit of history. NBC5's Courtney Sisk is taking us through that history of the railroad's role in presidential memorials.
President Jimmy Carter making his journey to his final resting place in Georgia as the country watches, honoring his legacy. Each fallen president makes a similar journey leading up to their funeral and burial. The tradition, though, largely altered back in 1865 during President Abraham Lincoln's funeral.
This was the first time that a train was used.
Michael Szymanski of the historic Pullman Foundation in Chicago details how George Pullman, a pioneer of railroad travel, had just completed the first luxury sleeping car, changing the game for cross-country travel. Pullman offered up 2 of the new model train cars to be used for dignitaries in Lincoln's funeral procession from Chicago to Springfield.
It established a major tradition.
Having this funeral train that moved across the country allowed Americans, thousands and thousands of Americans, to feel like they were a part of that national observation or in grieving of a president.
The exposure from Lincoln's funeral train helped boost Pullman's reputation and laid the foundation for the factory to come right here to Chicago.
It was a gracious thing to offer the car, but it was also a very smart business thing to have this opportunity to introduce this new revolutionary product.
2 years following the funeral, Pullman's Palace Car Company was officially incorporated in Illinois and influenced railroads across the country to adapt to a new way of travel.
Like the Michigan Central started to make adjustments to accommodate Pullman cars. And so it was a big deal.
A deal that paved the way we move and honor American leaders today. Courtney Sisk, NBC5 News.
An interesting tie I never knew about. Our thanks to Courtney.